Kia ora koutou. I'm Norma Campbell, Executive Director of Maternity and Midwifery for Canterbury, Waitaha and Te Taupitini, the west coast of the South Island of New Zealand. And and I've been in this role for the past 7 years. And prior to that, I was with the New Zealand College of Midwives as their principal advisor for 17 years. It was a national role, and occasionally got to come to ICM as well, which was always wonderful too. And particularly the council meetings I loved, actually, as well as the congresses. So that was a huge privilege, and it's a fond memory in my life of my career. Before that, I was the maternity manager of our community birthing unit. It was a very old unit called the Bird Birthing Unit, and it was part of a rehabilitation hospital, actually, but there was this little 10-bed birthing unit that sat there as well, and was there for about 5 years. And before that, I was one of the first midwives when the law changed in New Zealand to become we call them lead maternity care midwives now, but we just called ourselves midwives actually then, who worked in the community and was part of one of the first midwifery practices in Christchurch, and loved that actually, especially as we were finding our way as an autonomous practitioner. And then before that was worked in, I was an educator for they weren't midwifery students who were just midwifery students then. They were all nurses who were midwifery students. So it was before we started working towards that, before when I was being an educator. And when I was an educator, the day 2, I think I bumped into Karen Gilliland, who, of course, has been a lifelong friend ever since and colleague. And she had these magical ideas of what we could do in New Zealand. And of course, Sally Pearman was part of that mix-up as well, and Sue Bree. And also I have been very, very fortunate to be surrounded by these amazing colleagues, and found myself in places as a student midwife in Scotland, because we couldn't train midwives in New Zealand back then. I know that probably is quite hard for the rest of the world to comprehend, but in the late 1970s, we had no education programs for midwives. In fact, the word was just about extinct from our language in New Zealand. So I was doing my travel, which lots of New Zealanders do, and went to the UK and did my midwifery education. Well, it was training actually. I don't know that it was education. It was a year-long do as you're told education at the Royal Maternity, fondly called Rotten Row in Glasgow, and still have some dear colleagues over there that I did that with. We're still midwives, and then came back home and worked in the neonatal unit, and then went to work in the education sector. And as I say, and then bumped into all of this crowd of strong women who have been in my life ever since, and who I know are always there. And yeah, so that's been me. That's how I've spent the last 42 years actually as a midwife. So.
Amazing, eh? Thank you, Norma.
Here, that's for sure.
No, well, you don't.
It was beyond my wildest dreams, because it was just incomprehensible. Coming back to New Zealand, we had no midwives apart from those who'd been educated through the hospital system, but really it was such a different picture to what we had just on a decade later, actually. It was pretty amazing.
And even though, I mean, I share that, because even though in the UK, as you say, it was a training, not an education, the midwives still thought they were autonomous practitioners, and they talked
absolutely
up their shingles, and to some extent they sort of were, but they were terrifying as well.
Yes, that's right. But they really taught me. I mean, because we didn't really have midwives here. The UK midwives back then were very strong, very stroppy sort of women, but strong, and just loved the families that they cared for, and really worked hard to make sure. And I worked in the East End of Glasgow, which was a very poor part of Glasgow, and it was incredible. The families let you into the homes. We wouldn't let anybody else in, but they let the midwife in because they trusted midwives to look after them. And that just gave me a whole different perception. Because even my nursing training at the time, it was very medically orientated and you did what you were told and all of those things. I wasn't of the generation where girls can do anything. That was sort of the one after me. And so this was a really empowering, even though now we'd look at it and think it's not. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so talking to Norma Campbell. And Norma, if you would introduce yourself, tell us your current role and a brief sort of background to the last 30 plus years of how you've got to where you are now.
Kia ora koutou. I'm Norma Campbell, Executive Director of Maternity and Midwifery for Canterbury, Waitaha and Te Taupitini, the West Coast of the South Island of New Zealand. And and I've been in this role for the past 7 years. And prior to that, I was with the New Zealand College of Midwives as their principal advisor for 17 years. It was a national role, and occasionally got to come to ICM as well, which was always wonderful too. And particularly the council meetings I loved, actually, as well as the congresses. So that was a huge privilege, and it's a fond memory in my life of my career. Before that, I was the maternity manager of our community birthing unit. It was a very old unit called the Burwood Birthing Unit, and it was part of a rehabilitation hospital, actually, but there was this little 10-bed birthing unit that sat there as well, and was there for about 5 years. And before that, I was one of the first midwives when the law changed in New Zealand to become we call them lead maternity care midwives now, but we just called ourselves midwives actually then, who worked in the community and was part of one of the first midwifery practices in Christchurch, and loved that actually, especially as we were finding our way as an autonomous practitioner. And then before that was worked in, I was an educator for they weren't midwifery students who were just midwifery students then. They were all nurses who were midwifery students. So it was before we started working towards that before, when I was being an educator. And when I was an educator, the day 2, I think I bumped into Karen Gilliland, who, of course, has been a lifelong friend ever since and colleague. And she had these magical ideas of what we could do in New Zealand. And of course, Sally Pearman was part of that mix-up as well, and Sue Bree. And also I have been very, very fortunate to be surrounded by these amazing colleagues, and found myself in places as a student midwife in Scotland, because we couldn't train midwives in New Zealand back then. I know that probably is quite hard for the rest of the world to comprehend, but in the late 1970s, we had no education programs for midwives. In fact, the word was just about extinct from our language in New Zealand. So I was doing my travel, which lots of New Zealanders do, and went to the UK and did my midwifery education. And well, it was training actually. I don't know that it was education. It was a year-long do as you're told education at the Royal Maternity, fondly called Rotten Row in Glasgow, and still have some dear colleagues over there that I did that with. Were still midwives, and then came back home and worked in the neonatal unit, and then went to work in the education sector. And as I say, and then bumped into all of this crowd of strong women who have been in my life ever since, and who I know are always there. And yeah, so that's been me. That's how I've spent the last 42 years actually as a midwife. So.
Amazing, eh? Thank you, Norma.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I never would have thought that I'd be here. That's for sure.
New Zealand, you have lead maternity carer, LMC midwives,
Carers, yeah.
who basically provide care for women in a continuity of care model on their own responsibility. So they'll have a caseload. And in around this area that you're talking about, Rolleston, sort of 20, 25 minutes outside of Christchurch, the biggest fastest growing centre, you've got a number of LMC midwives working there, and they will have women that they are caring for in that community. And those women can choose to give birth in this birthing unit, or maybe they will need to give birth in Christchurch Women's. But
Christchurch Women's, that's right.
But if they are having a normal physiological pregnancy, there's no reason why they wouldn't give birth in the birthing unit. And the midwife will come in with the woman when she goes into labour. And you've got midwives in the unit as well, right, who are also there 24 hours providing care. The midwives maybe come and go, depending, especially in the postnatal period. And those other core midwives within the unit are providing care as well. But all of them are incredibly experienced and very, very good at assessment and recognising and thinking about the time that a woman or baby would need if they need to be transferred. And as you say, the unit itself is about normal physiological birth. It's not about providing care for women who are having complications. So those women don't.
No, that's right.
They shouldn't be there. They should be closer to obstetric and paediatric neonatal assistance.
That's right.
So that there's no, the transfer referral consultation referral transfer system is all set up so that those midwives can consult and refer in the tertiary centre, and there's no issue. There's no failed normal birth or failed home birth.
No, not at all. And quite the opposite. And I think, what we've got is the obstetricians at Christchurch Women's. We asked them to take more interest in when the phone call comes, or would they be able to help if suddenly something happened, like a postpartum hemorrhage? So, for example, sometimes you don't know that there's going to be a hemorrhage, and so a hemorrhage occurs. And so our midwives are highly skilled, as you say, and some of them are, graduates as well now, because we have got double staffing on all of these. So there's two midwives on a shift, two core midwives on a shift for a 10-bed unit. And they look after one of them is second midwife, if you like, for the LMC midwife, who then doesn't have to bring in her practice partners or anything. She can come in. She knows very well her colleagues and she trusts them, and so that's a very trusting relationship, because it's a collegial relationship, and we work hard to make sure we know who everybody is. They support each other. And are good friends often. They really do work closely, but they've just chosen to be paid in different ways or work in different ways. One likes the hospital where they know their shifts and they work their set hours, and the other one doesn't like doing that. They like to be on call and like to be out in the community. So, and midwives chop and change through their career as well, and it's great. It's great when it works like that, and it does certainly work like that when you have this option, because it actually gives midwives professional options around things, because not everyone wants to become a secondary tertiary midwife, whereas if you only have the big hospital, it's a retention strategy to also have community units, because it de-escalates those tertiary midwives. We've got a lot of ours saying, could we do a secondment at some stage when someone's on leave, so that we can just get out of the noise and reassure ourselves that actually a lot of these women can give birth, because they don't get to see that a lot. From the community unit, we want them to talk to you, not the registrar. We want them to talk to you, and actually, if need be, we might need to turn the cameras on with telehealth now, and we've got they often just do it by phone even, and say, this is what we're facing. Have we missed it? This is what we've done. That we're waiting for the ambulance, and so our consultants will come into the picture, even though they're in Christchurch Women's Hospital 20 minutes away, they come into the picture and they say, okay, you've done really well. What's this? What have you done this? What's this? You know, they go through their list, and our midwife, they all be educated, ongoing education together around emergency things, and occasionally it'll be a senior registrar, which is almost a consultant that does it. But they've increasingly started to see that their responsibility is not just Christchurch Women's, that when they're asked and called, it's about holding the hand virtually of those midwives who are facing sometimes quite challenging situations. Our NICU does the same for neonatal resusces. And so whilst we're waiting for the resus team to come out from Christchurch Women's with a portable incubator, which can take quite some time, another consultant stays behind and keeps talking them through it. And so it is a whole of system to support, but it's not a system that's pulling apart community units. And when these things happen in our community units, of course we look into what happened, what was the background, was there anything we can learn? We have quality systems that sit around it. We do that with our LMC colleagues. And it's not a blame game. It's not anything like that. It's actually, and that we've worked really hard with that too. We are a system, and we've got different moving parts. Yeah. And we're just, all doing the best job we can. And when things happen, it's scary, and we need to support each other the best way we can. And it's really scary for that poor whānau, the family. So it's really scary for them. So we need to wrap around and make sure, and it's reassuring to family to know that Christchurch Women's are looking in. It was an interesting concept for a wee while, but actually it's worked really well. And it doesn't happen with everyone. Sometimes the transfers are quite straightforward and we don't need them. We just tell them we're coming and they're waiting, and then, as soon as they arrive, they see them straight away. So that's part of our referral guidelines. So transfer in from outside, you get seen straight away. Really helps it more than anything is that confidence that I think what stops a lot of things is the secondary tertiary hospitals are medically run, not strongly midwifery, or ours isn't. Some are great, some are very strongly midwifery as well. Ours is not as strong as it could be. It's getting better. But we'd had a couple of things happen. Our birthing suite was incredibly busy, and we had about 20 admissions a day just for observation, just people who'd reduced fetal movements and things like that. So I said, we need to set up a midwifery assessment unit, because you don't need all of those people, and midwives can assess the woman and send them home. People are going to die, and you, Norma Campbell, are going to kill them by setting this unit up. That actually was said to me. And I said, no, we're not, because our midwives know how to assess people, and they know whether they need to see an obstetrician or not. And if they don't, then actually they can send them home to the care of their LMC. And we set that up probably about a year earlier. And that's been hugely, they can't manage without it now. And so within about 3 or 4 weeks, they said, oh my goodness, how did we manage doing all of this? So that was wonderful. So like, what else have you got up your sleeve, sort of thing. So they really trust the midwives in those community units, because they don't want to keep anything that's going to be a problem, because it's not, they haven't got the skills and scope to deal with something that's really needing a cesarean section or.
I mean, Norma, what you're coming to, and I think this is a very nice segue into talking about the primary units that you have created and developed, is the importance of environment. And we underestimate it, I think, hugely. Even as midwives, we underestimate, when we're working in a tertiary setting, the impact that has on our practice, on our decision making. It increases fear, and we know, of course, that this is true for women. Coming into an environment that is not theirs, that's frightening. They have lost confidence. They don't have, 3 older sisters having babies anymore, or that whole family understanding of birth as a normal life event is harder to see they're targeted with all this nonsense on social media and so on. So I think, you know, and we've got the evidence on this. We know that environment matters.
I mean, I've been privileged to attend some home births in my time, and the dynamic is really different when you attend a home birth, as you know, Sally. And the power base is different. You're the guest in their house, and you follow their house rules. And you so there's a different dynamic to when someone comes into your house, the hospital, and the rules, they don't know the rules there either. And so what women told us was that they could feel the adrenaline. They were frightened. They didn't know what of. They knew that was a safe place to have their baby, but there was something different about it. The women who had complications and the preterm births and everything, of course, they felt really reassured by it and didn't feel any of this at all, actually. And so I guess I just worked with that, really. And for me, researched birthplace, we've researched outcomes. We're constantly providing outcomes for so many years now of what the difference is when you birth in the community compared to in a hospital, the birthplace study in the UK, you know, all of that, the transfer rates, the outcomes, the neonatal outcomes. Like, how many times do we have to keep producing this evidence? And I still saw someone the other day about to do a study around it and doing all that. I'm thinking, why do we have to keep doing this? We've proved it over and over. So we either believe our research and believe the evidence that we've got and acknowledge that, yes, okay, we're in a different world now, but actually it's not turning up anything different when we do it. And our community units actually replicate the birthplace studies in the UK. So the transfers, the admissions to neonatal, I think we have a 5% caesarean section rate out of those units. Now we have like a 25% transfer rate because it's far, or for Oromaraki, because it's far further away. But actually, when they go to Christchurch Women's, they might need some pain relief, they might need whatever, and actually they have a normal birth. Because I had the local people on board, as in our Indigenous people on board, speaking quite loudly about it as well, our Pacifica community, that we just kept asking them, what do you think? And they were really involved in the design of this unit because it was already built. So we just had to
change it,
try to make it better. And it's surpassed my wildest dreams, to be honest. Yeah, so I started this role 7 years ago, and one of my key motivations for applying for the role was that many people you won't have known, or you might have remembered, that Christchurch had a big earthquake in 2010, and that's when Burwood was actually, it was demolished really because it couldn't continue, and the whole central city changed. And so at that time, they ran a forum with our community and asked what people wanted, but they were going to have to destroy. So people said they wanted to be closer to Christchurch Women's if they had their choice, which was interesting. But they also wanted a community birthing unit. So that was in 2012. I started in 2017 in this role, and we still didn't have it. And so I thought, right, well, I'll run another forum and just see what, because apparently modern women are completely different today and so it came through. I think we had about 120 at the forum, various ethnicities, various walks of life, and they were really clear. We want central city, close to the city, close to Christchurch Women's, but, not in it, and a community birthing unit that we can go to when we're well. So that was a good platform for me. I wasn't in this role then, but I was constantly battering on their doors about how can we make things change and what can we do and what can we do. And so I went in one day, and the director of planning and funding, they were called there, and said to me, so do you want to prove one of these things of yours? I said, well, what are you talking about? She said, do you want a birthing unit at Rolleston or not? Do you want to be in or not? And I said, yes, absolutely, I'll be in. I had no idea what she was talking about, to be honest, but I thought, actually, we'll just see what they say. So, well, how many beds do you want? I said, I'd like a 10-bed unit, thanks. And so it's because that was 2018. So it was only about a year or so after I'd started, but I'd been making a lot of noise about we can't keep having everyone in the whole city delivering at Christchurch Women's Hospital. We just can't keep doing this. It was built for 4,000 to have 6,000 going through it. The churn was huge. We had to discharge those who'd had normal births middle of the night, whatever, to somewhere else, for postnatal care, because we couldn't have them on our ward because our ward was full of the really high risk women. So, and the local people gave it, local tangata whenua and Māori gave us that.
Māori.
So it's the breath of life.
Breath of life. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So the Oromaraki unit opened about when? About a year ago, maybe, or less?
Oh no, it's 2 years ago in June. 2 years ago. Yeah. Okay. It was 2 years ago.
And what have you seen in terms of the numbers, like the numbers have increased of women in the local area deciding they will birth there? Yeah.
Yeah, and of course we didn't have a central city unit at that time, so a lot of women would go from the south side of Christchurch out to that unit as well. And we've got Rangiora, which was opened before I started. It was always there, and just got a newer facility.
That's to the north,
and it's in the north of the city.
It's
to the north. We've got one to the south, and then we've got a little tiny one in Ashburton, which is about to refurb as well. So the outcomes, as I said, they're really good. They reflect the birthplace outcomes, actually. The babies, I think we had one baby at the transfers we had one baby ended up in NICU for like 2 days, but it was just, it wasn't serious last year. And so of our transfers, it's a 5% cesarean section rate. So, it's pretty good, actually, considering our current cesarean section rate in that tertiary hospital is up in the high 30s. So it's pretty good to get in and out of there and not need a cesarean and not get a cesarean section rather than need it. And my obstetric colleagues would argue with me that they only do them when they're needed. But I think the environment we have creates a situation where labour stalls, actually. I really do. I think I was still continuing to try and get a central city unit. And would say it every time I had a chance around, of course, all these units are great, but what about the central city? Because we've got a high refugee population. There's the women out east who didn't have anything. And they were all wanted. So we ran another meeting for them, and again they reiterated, yes, that unit was lovely out in Boston, but where's ours? And so it was probably about just it might have been just before it was before Oromaraki opened, actually, that we I got called again by this manager and said, we're going to do bowel screening and we have to shift it off the Christchurch Hospital campus. And so we're going to do it quite close to the campus, quite close to the big hospital. So we thought, you've been talking a lot about it. Would you like our birthing unit alongside the bowel screening? And I said, absolutely, love to. So, and I thought, this is going to be a hard sell. Anyway, but I just figured, well, bowel screening is mostly through the day and they're closed at night. And so this will be fine. It'll be a marriage made in heaven. It'll be absolutely fine. And so we put an expression of interest out to find property, and we found a property. And then I can't remember what the reason was, but the bowel screening people couldn't proceed with their part of it. So I just made the assumption that we were proceeding with my side, the side that I was involved in, and didn't ask any questions and just continued to assume that we were going to be doing a business case. And I got a lot of the local community to come in behind, but actually by the end, the facilities team had actually understood what I was trying to do too. And so it was a building, an already built building for the police station. So it had been a police station, and it looked like the police station. It had cells and everything was terrible. And it also came with terrible auras around it. So for our local population, and for everybody really, we had to do quite a lot of blessing of it and cleansing of it. And people had to get their head around, including most of us, around how on earth we were going to create a birthing unit in this space, a 20-bed birthing unit. And so again, they sort of said, so how many bedrooms are we talking about? And I said, we need 2,500 women out of Christchurch Women's Hospital, because I'd been calculating at the point of going in, and it was about 2,000 to 2,500 a year. And so we worked out we needed a 20-bed birthing unit. And I guess I'm still a bit staggered that no one really challenged it. But actually, I just knew that we had 2,500 women. I could see it in the data that didn't need to be there. So why would we not take them away? And the other thing was, Christchurch Women's was drowning. The acuity, as we all know, is increasing, and women don't just have one issue now; they have two or three often. Our neonatal intensive care unit, as a result, is of the preterm labours that come because of the environment, again, intrauterine environment, I think, were increasing too, and they needed a hand. And so that was what I talked to them about. Again, I included our medical team and said, you do not need all of these really low-risk women in this place. What you need is capacity to be able to care for those who you need to use your skills with, and let us care for those who don't need those skills. They need midwifery skills. So again, part of my role was complaints, and we talk about birth trauma, and in fact, I was just talking about today, we started a clinic to meet women around their birth trauma, and these are women who 9 times out of 10 are low risk, but have come in and something's happened, whatever the something is, for whatever reason. And they're the ones who have the trauma. The ones who are really complex with the accretors and all of that, they sort of actually, they're ready for it. They're ready for the worst case scenario. These women come in expecting to have a nice normal birth, welcome their baby, pull it up onto their chest. They don't expect that they're going to be rushed into theatre, have a cesarean section, have a hemorrhage. In fact, hemorrhage was the single biggest reason for our trauma. And we have a reasonably high hemorrhage rate, because actually, I don't know, I just don't think anyone's expecting this low-risk woman will have all of these problems. So there's a whole lot of physiology that's going on there. I don't think we understand that.
No, but not at all. Mind-body connection, the whole.
Oh, yeah.
How that.
So we're busy doing all of this data collection, proving how primary birthing units and community birthing units can be, have all these great outcomes, and yet we're not doing the work and seeing why it is when you put somebody into a high stress environment, which actually every other mammal around the world, every biologist can tell you, the cortisol levels go up, and everything that's meant to happen doesn't. So I don't see why it's any different. Your adrenaline response, your fight and flight, all of that happens. And that's what the women were telling me when they were complaining around lack of informed consent or any of those things that had happened through the rush. So it just struck me, 2,500 women didn't need that, and we should be doing better. And so, and it's coming in budget. We had a very tight budget with it. And, I had to go and speak to Treasury twice, New Zealand Government Treasury, and argue about why we needed this and what we were doing. And so we opened that 4 weeks, on April the 16th, and 2024, and we've nearly had 45 births, I think 50 births, and a lot of primate labouring, very fast labours. The transfers we've had, they walk out the door into their car. We've got car parks outside the door. They don't get in an ambulance. When it's for pain relief or whatever, they walk around the building a couple of times just to make sure Christchurch Women's, has said, actually, how bad is she? Could she wait a little bit? We're really busy at the moment. If we want to pay really good attention to her, can she wait 20 minutes? So they come in the car and they just walk in, carry their bags. See you soon. We've had a couple of emergencies, but we've had great working relationships as well with our ambulance service, our neonatal unit, and again, our obstetricians, doing the same as they did at Oromaraki, making sure they stay tuned to us. And our team of midwives there actually are a highly experienced team of midwives who some were about to retire. Actually, they'd had enough. And as one said recently to me, she said, I said, well, how long do you think you'll work now? And she said, I think I've got another 4 years in me now. So it's about captured the community. They get it, that they go there if they've got no risk factors. And we've got 90 booked for May. That's so, and they're starting to come in, and the bookings are coming in for June already as well. And again, the same model, they're coming with their own midwife that they've known all the time. We have 3 midwives on a shift in this unit because we're now taking up to 15 at a time. But it's interesting, the postnatal stays, they just put their babies on the breast and they breastfeed, and they're sort of gone in 2 days because they're sort of like, well, let's go now.
Yeah. Advocacy to get it off the ground that you had to do, and granted, there had been a groundswell of requests, yes. So not entirely, but you did need to draw on the evidence. You did still have to prove the case.
All of that.
Sort of basically try to show the cost saving and the benefits of this.
That's right. I think I just looked at it today. I think it's $1,900 to have a normal birth in our community unit, and it's like 4,000 or 5,000 at Christchurch Women's, something like that. Oh, I can find that. And so, pardon? To have a normal birth, yeah.
It's crazy.
Just because it's a high, and we use far more equipment. I mean, it's a stupid thing. I mean, we have CTGs in our community units, but they're for antenatal, they're not for labour. And actually, we've said that, and we've been really clear about that. And actually, we've talked about the fact that what would you do? What's the point of putting a CTG on? You're either making a decision to transfer or you're not. You're either worried or you're not. You need to go. The midwife manager at Lincoln had just finished her master's on birth environments. And the architect who was building the building at Rolleston he was in his 70s and had never, ever done a birthing unit. He was very excited. She was very excited. They came together, and actually it was meant to be, really. And so, so my role as part of the project team was to put nothing in their way so they could actually do what needed to be done to create the environment that needed to be done. So I think as a midwifery leader, that your job then is to trust those who've done the work, make sure the project team is around the project, and then my job was to work with all of the engineers and everybody else who were a bit sort of not sure about what I was going on about. But there was we are lucky to have and they work a little bit now across the whole South Island of New Zealand. They are a facility, so they're ex-builders and people who've project managed builds and things like that. So they're very handy people to have on a project like this because they keep you within your lane, really. And I think again you have to trust those people. So you have to build up that working relationship. So when Bronwyn came and said, that's the midwife manager, came and said, actually, the ceilings can't be white, they have to be brown. There was a lot of shock horror that went on.
Why did they have to
but because we were creating a birthing cocoon environment.
Yes, because
the white is just too bright.
Yes.
And so they went, so they would ring me up and say, well, she's lost it now.
This is clarity. This is Bronwyn, who used to run Lincoln,
who was still running Lincoln at the time.
Who just done her masters
who just done her masters, yes. And so her team,
the idea of
and Lincoln maternity, those midwives were ex-Burwood midwives, actually, and they just know they have complete confidence, but they also know when things are not right, and they're very. I think people often think that community birthing unit midwives don't do much, but they are absolutely constantly supporting the model we have here in New Zealand, which is midwifery continuity care. So they support those midwives. They get to know them really well. They had about 2 practices of midwives that sat around Lincoln maternity. So we got all of them involved in this planning as well. So everyone, the hospital aides, the cleaners, everybody was on this journey. We call it being in the same waka, which is like a boat, but being in the same journey towards, we're going to go to Rolleston, and this is where we're going to do, and we're going to build and this unit's being built, and this is going to be your unit. And so what do we need? Those midwives were really clear what they needed, and what they needed was a proper birthing rooms with pools, with leaners, with everything. So all of those, there was no arguments, that all happened.
But just explain.
But my job was really.
Just explain, sorry, because I know I've had the advantage of
that's fine. Yes,
birthing rooms, but you've got birthing pools so that women can be in water during or give birth if they want to in the water.
That's right. They can give birth in there, or they often, like many mammals, leap out, but they certainly use it for pain relief. Yeah,
absolutely. So then you've also got,
and then there's the leaner, and there's a pole to get out of the pool, and so safety, but they lean on that and hang down on that. In the toilet, we have like you have in older people's toilets who can't stand, and they can lean on that, but they can bear down on that as well. And there's a shower in every room too, so they can be in the pool, but sometimes they get warm and they want to be in the shower for a while, so they do the shower. So you're moving through different spaces.
I remember seeing you've got these different sorts of seating arrangements. You've got ways for women to be kneeling on soft, on squabs on the floor. They can change. The whole thing is about changing position and keeping moving, and it's not about being
keeping moving, keeping that baby moving down and moving
and
where she needs to be.
Is there a bed in the rooms?
No, there's one of the rooms doesn't have a bed. It has a birthing couch, which you can sort of sit on and just lean back into, and it's got a hole in it that either you can lean with your back, or like most women actually don't want to be exposed like that. They go inside, so the pregnant belly just fits into that space, and so they can just lean in there, and then they can stand up from there and rock. They can move, and their family can be with them, or their partner, or their other kids. We support whatever they need and whoever they need to be with them. And as part of these units are family rooms, we call them. So there's family rooms so that they can the family can go in and out, make cups of tea, and we welcome family to come and support and be there with her, along with her own midwife that she has known since she booked with her, usually around 8 to 12 weeks of pregnancy, and then who will give her that care postnatally as well. So she's at the birth, and then and if she does need to go into Christchurch Women's, then the LNC will go in the ambulance with her as well, and then transfer her over to the secondary tertiary team who are waiting for her, because we ring them up and tell them, and there's a whole process that sits around that. And I think,
Norma, thank you. I know that you also did a huge amount of work in terms of working with your building team and helping them to fully understand what this was about, just to build and what this, and that they embraced it, because I know you told me when we had our lovely team, and you could see it, their pride in the work that they were doing, because they actually believed in what it was that they were building.
The facilities team could do the tour, and they could talk about the environment you need to birth well, and it was really lovely actually. But the builders, that's what I was saying, the actual building team who'd come in, just the contractors, they were so excited to be part of it as well, because it was different to anything they'd ever seen. They'd built hospitals before, but they'd never built a birthing unit, and so both sets of builders really, they were joyous about it. It was lovely, and took photos a lot and shared it with their communities. And, it was really lovely to see that. And they all came to the blessing and the openings and things as well. So it was was really lovely.
Norma, just to mention, because I think they're also very different. Do you want to tell us a little bit? I mean, we've talked about what the birthing rooms are like, but tell us what the postnatal rooms are like.
Yeah, so in our Kurawaka Waipapa, this unit is called, the land it's on is called Waipapa by local people, so for our Maori. Yes, there was quite a request. So we've got, of the 20 beds in postnatal, 10 of them are queen beds. They have sort of like a peppy pod, we call them, so from learning how to safe sleep in a queen bed. But a number of the women also said, look, we sometimes have our mum with us, or our partner and our mum, or our auntie or our sister, and so we don't want to be, we want some of the beds to be single beds, and in those rooms we've got single beds with chaise lounge with a linen pack, so that whoever comes, and we welcome the whole family. So we've had a couple of the women who are still breastfeeding their first child, and so they come and stay the night as well. So they all come in and stay. So yeah, and that's okay. So
tell us what a peppy pod is, because that's not.
So yeah, peppy pod. So peppy is a baby in Maori language, in our native language, so peppy is a baby. So it's a pod. It basically, there's two types. The beautiful one, which are called wahakura in Maori, and that's their flax woven, harakiki flax woven into a beautiful basket with a mattress. And that sits in the middle of the bed so that the parents both sides, or and so it's a safe sleep space. And the peppy pods, the other ones, are like perspex, little boxes.
The old bedside cot.
Yeah, they look a bit like that, but littler. And they sit there, so there's a safe sleep space, so that that babies don't get rolled on, and we can teach family from a cot death perspective or a SUDI perspective that they don't. They use safe sleep techniques when they're home. So we model that in all of our units as well. So yeah.
In the postnatal rooms, as I remember, some of them had their own bathrooms and some of them have shared bathrooms with the next room with very
so they have an ensuite. This, I think 10 with en suites. We have a couple of rooms which are isolation rooms. They can be used as isolation rooms. So if someone has COVID, or they have MRSA or some of those other bugs, that they can still come to our community units, but they can be isolated and still have the beauty of the same experience. And the Jack and Jill bathrooms, they call them. So they so you go in and you lock the door, and that makes the other door lock automatically. So so it's free we have Wi-Fi. We don't have TVs or anything like that. And we have 2 family rooms, one in the birthing end. There's 4 birthing rooms in Kurawaka, and then a very big one in the postnatal part, which is beautiful actually, and it has tables and couches. And so every time I've been in, there's at least 1 or 2 families having a shared lunch with their extended family, and they're chattering to each other. And we have breakfast, the same with all of our community units. So breakfast in the morning is, we encourage them to go down and get their own cereal and toast, and talk to each other about how their night was, and actually share, because I think often today, and certainly in our country, people are quite isolated, and they just sit on social media. So we try to help people have community connections by really encouraging them to go and get their own breakfast and things, and talk to each other about how the night was. Yeah, so
I'm going to.
It's about having, I think there does need to be midwives, but those midwives understanding and having the confidence really that they have skills, that they can care for families. And I think it's community. I'm a firm believer that if you have to have the community behind you, and sharing the vision, and in fact driving the vision. So I think for Kurawaka, I don't have anything to do particularly with the design process of them. That is actually up to the local community to determine how they want to see it. And and so there's a lot of conversations with local communities, both of them, and so they do look different. And that's really, but there's some principles, as you say, around the birth spaces, and then coming out into a place where you can rest after birth as well. And some of our little units, because there was also the ones on the West Coast in Bulla that it's just a room, a birth room, and then it's a bedroom, a swing room, just in it's like in a medical practice, actually, sort of an observation area in a medical practice. And for that remote rural community to have their own birthing room, so we've done that there, and it's they love it, because they can stay overnight and maybe the next day as well, and then they go back home to their farm or wherever they live, often a couple of hours away. So I think that's worked really well. It doesn't have to be a big 20-bed unit. We've done the same in Kaikoura, actually. So